Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajkumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we explore a real-world dilemma. We also feature people who are working from the inside to enlighten us about the world around us. Journalist Kate Nelson is here, an Alaska Native TlingiKt tribal member. Kate focuses on amplifying Native American changemakers and issues. She covers Indigenous topics for national and international outlets, including the BBC, Esquire, The Daily Beast, and National Geographic. Kate is here for the case file I call Indigenous Awakening. Kate, with films like Killers of the Flower Moon getting so much buzz in the 2024 awards season, and Indigenous food taking center stage across the country, we've seen an uptick in representation. But more work is needed. What would you like to see?
You're so right that we're seeing historic representation across pop culture, even politics, with more officials in both elected and appointed roles. But like you said, I think this is really just the tip of the spear, as I've heard some people phrase it, that non-Native audiences are starting to take interest in Indigenous issues and trying to really understand and unravel our really complex history as a country that, has, with our background based in colonialism, that has negatively impacted tribal communities. And there are still issues that so many Indigenous peoples face today. And so I think there's this, again, celebration of Indigenous cultures that's taking place. But I would really love to see audiences dig a little bit deeper beneath the surface to understand, again, these issues that are affecting these communities and to understand how, we all can be a part of the solution.
How do you even begin to educate the mainstream people out there, not necessarily Native cultures, but even Native cultures? There's not one Indigenous culture. There are so many histories, so many narratives. How do you even attempt to do that, knowing that you could get pushback in different ways?
You're totally right that Native cultures are not a monolith. In the United States alone, there are 574 federally recognized tribes, and there are, beyond that, state-recognized tribes. And so by no means, can one person like me speak on behalf of all Native America. But there definitely are issues that tend to affect tribal communities, and there are shared values. It's tricky because, unfortunately, a lot of American history classes that, we learn in grade school or in high school don't tell us the full background. So there's almost a re-education that needs to happen. I've spent my career in mainstream media. I really bring a lot of that to my work, amplifying Indigenous issues to hopefully meet audiences where they're at, knowing that the average person probably doesn't have a very in-depth understanding of these topics, but I want people to know they aren't Indigenous issues. They're human issues that happen to disproportionately affect a certain community. And I want people to, again, understand what's going on and feel a sense of urgency to see if they can be part of the positive change that we're hoping to see.
In case file number 88, we talked with Paula Maccabee about water rights and how water rights all over the United States are so interconnected with Indigenous rights. Mm-hmm. And mining is specifically what she was getting into with us. And I cannot think of really one issue in the United States that doesn't have some interconnection to Native peoples. What would you say are kind of the top two issues right now that all of us should know are maybe the disproportionate happenings in Native cultures?
There's so much scientific research to back this up that shows that tribal communities face marked health inequities, outsized violence, higher rates of poverty, substance abuse, suicide, also have lower life expectancies. And all of these are really the result of, again, colonialism that this country was built on. And, I think instead of thinking that's something of the past, we need to look at how are people still affected today. If, for instance, let's say you're looking at, from a philanthropic perspective, how do you better support these communities? Just being aware of those issues, awareness is probably the number one thing that I'd love to have audiences just really step up with. But also to understand, like you've mentioned, identity. So there is no one Native American experience, especially with younger generations coming up. They might have grown up disconnected from their traditions. So there's a lot of reconnecting that's happening right now and a reclamation. Chef Sean Sherman at Awamni is doing this, revitalizing Native foodways. But there was for such a long time really a shame that was associated with Indigenous identity here in America. And that was really purposeful because the idea was, how do we have Native Americans really feel like they want to assimilate towards some of these European values? I love seeing young Natives and reconnecting Native individuals, again, just standing with such pride in who they are. And again, I would love for there to be understanding and patience from non-Natives that there's not one experience, that we are not stuck in the past. We've always been here. We're still here. We're going to continue to be here. And to allow Indigenous individuals to really express themselves in the way that they feel is truest to their identity.
Wow. I mean, so many things to cover. You've also just had such an amazing highlight reel of the kinds of people that you've been interviewing, including, as you mentioned, Chef Sean Sherman. For those who don't know him, give us kind of the 411 on him.
He is such an important thought leader in the Native community. He spent the past decade working to revitalize Indigenous foodways. He grew up on Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota and really didn't have a sense of his own people's food. He's Oglala Lakota, and he's learned how to cook French cuisine, Italian cuisine, but didn't understand his own people's food because he grew up really with the commodity food system. And so he then spent time delving into working with ethnobotanists, historians, other knowledge keepers to really help bring back some of these traditional ingredients, techniques, methods. And that same model can be applied to so many aspects beyond food, with this idea of bringing all of that really important traditional knowledge into the present. The best part about the work that he does is that people can actually experience it, and food is such a great way to connect with culture. People can get a reservation at Awamni or head to the Indigenous Food Lab at Midtown Global Market.
These are all in Minneapolis area.
Exactly, to get a taste for it themselves and hopefully to start a journey of understanding Indigenous cultures in a way that maybe they haven't in the past.
Wow, it's so great. What was it like talking with Sterlin Harjo? Is that how you say his name?
Yes.
Of Reservation Dogs.
Again, another thought leader. And what he has done, I know Killers of the Flower Moon obviously got so much great press throughout this award season, but Sterlin was really instrumental in helping sort of bust the door down and showing the joy, the trauma, the everyday life of an Indian reservation. So what is it like? It follows 4 kids. It's really a coming-of-age story. But as they navigate issues, like I mentioned, around poverty and identity, but it isn't just stuck in the past, and it isn't something that just fixates on the negative. And I think that's really important because it also weaves in so much important humor that reflects so many Native cultures. And I'm so excited to see the additional projects that he has coming up. And what's great is that he also had an all-Indigenous writers' room on the show, which is really a first of its kind.
That's amazing.
Yes. And so many of the writers that he brought in for that now have their own projects in the works, which is so important because, again, with Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese really sort of signed on to say, we should be telling Native stories. We should also involve Native storytellers in doing that. But we need to see more and more of that, and it can't always take someone like Martin Scorsese, who's this, Hollywood heavy hitter, to say, let's do this. So I love hearing that, from Reservation Dogs, there are all of these other stories in the works that are going to be showcasing Native cultures and traditions in all sorts of realms.
Well, I so love that you previewed that for us. I also want to go back in time with you because this journalism you've been doing for a while, but for a long time, your full-time job was with a magazine called Artful Living, and it was such a wonderful lifestyle, fashion, travel, high-profile people magazine. How did that work influence you or inspire you to do what you're doing now?
It's been so instrumental. And I really, as editor-in-chief, oversaw the full content strategy, so understood not just how do you put a story together, but what are you really trying to impress upon your audience, and also knowing how do editors like to work with writers. I feel like I had sort of a leg up in going out to the national media with some of these stories and being able to work in a way that they're used to, and also having an understanding of how do you craft a story from really a lifestyle perspective that's going to draw people in. And then you can educate, but so that it doesn't feel didactic. I think that's really key with this work, that I want people to be absorbed in the writing. I don't want them to come away from a story feeling, let's say, guilty, or that maybe they were bored by what they read.
Right, you want it to be accessible
to
the reader.
I want them to really delve into that story with me and to feel that human interaction. And so those things that I worked so hard to really incorporate into Artful Living, I've been able to bring along with me in this work as well.
That's so great. What would your advice be for a young person out there, could be a Native person, doesn't have to be, that's listening and just thinks, wow, I mean, she's done so much. You're in National Geographic, you've been in Elle, The Daily Beast, all these, I mean, too many to list here. Definitely look up Kate's work. And what would you say to inspire them to persevere or to even just plant the seed of their dream?
I think we're all storytellers. For me, that came in the form of journalism, but for others, that might be like Sterlin Harjo tells stories through film. Sherman tells stories through food. The idea is, how do you tell your story and stories that matter in a way that feels really true to you? And I do a lot of informational interviews with journalism students, and I have to tell them every single time to just go for it. You really can't question yourself, and you have to be persistent and make sure that you're staying true to who you are, but keep knocking on those doors because they will open. And especially if you do good work and you're telling important stories, there are definitely people who want to hear them.
Well, that is such a nice note. Thank you, Kate, for your insights. Read Kate's work and connect directly at kateanelson.com. Today's Crisis Brief is brought to you by Goff Public. Number 1, how do you tell your story? It could be through the arts, through food, or in a way that's authentic to you. Number 2, if you want to know more about Indigenous cultures, start by learning the history of where you live. Number 3, there are 574 federally recognized tribes. Native American communities are not a monolith. Reputation issues can arise quickly and unexpectedly. Prepare and plan before a crisis strikes with Goff Public, an award-winning public relations and public affairs agency. Your best defense is a crisis-ready culture that helps you spot potential issues, act swiftly, and reflects your brand's values while building trust with your audiences. Learn more at goffpublic.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Check out our website, thecrisisfiles.com, to catch up on all case files in one easy spot. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at The Crisis Files. I'm Roshini Rajkumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.